Oh. Is there a copy of the agenda somewhere? Did I miss it?
There was right there.
Oh, I took them all. Right there. Took them all, Woody. Put them up here if anyone needs them. Yeah, we got some over here too.
So Mark, one of our colleagues here, Vice Chair Edgy Walworth, is going to kind of facilitate the meeting with your part of the presentation. So
that's me, Mark. Nice meeting you.
Same here.
We tried to spread the wealth around a little bit.
Good.
So we have actually, there isn't anybody else on there.
Yeah.
Looks like we were just joined by a guest, Kayla Williams. Can you hear us okay?
Yeah, hi. I can hear you okay.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi.
So no Joe, no Laura yet.
One of the things that I don't know if we should consider, but you know the PUC commissioner. Now I'm drawing a blank on the guy's name. Sorry, one of them's retiring, right? He's term limited, and I don't know if anybody in Pueblo has had the opportunity to talk about it. And it'd be nice. Should ask that to Nick when he was here. Nick came in.
I mean, in terms of lobbying to get somebody from our area.
Yeah,
PUC. Yeah, I think the mayor has talked about that. Yeah, and so I don't know, and maybe even Mark knows something about any of that that might be going on when that term is up, and any other names out there. So.
Because it would be nice to get somebody from south, eastern Colorado,
right?
In that mix.
So everybody, I want to welcome all of our guests, and
you see Laura's hopping on.
Okay, yeah. I'm hoping a few more people will be joining us. And Laura, are you on?
Yes, I am. Hi, everyone. Sorry, I'm in a vehicle, but I am here.
No, that's all right. And Laura, that I just want to let you know that we do have, and you probably, I don't know, you just on the phone or you have a screen? Yeah, okay. So we have Mark Davidson and with us today, and we're going to spend as much time as we need giving him the opportunity to talk, and then Edgy's going to facilitate that discussion with the rest of us. And so where did Alyssa go? John B. Hill. John, are you on?
He's still connecting to audio.
Okay.
There's Alyssa.
All right, let's let him get on and then we'll get going.
Okay.
Last time.
John, you on?
You got your sunglasses.
Old John. So Mark, one of our members is joining us on the screen is John B. Hill. He's our representative from Black Hills that's on our committee. Okay. John, are you there yet?
I am.
All right, welcome, John. All right.
Good afternoon.
Okay, good.
Hey, please don't be distracted by the ugly wreath behind me here. My wife put that up, and I said, "Hey, that's where I sit for meetings."
Okay, we can't even see it, so
that's
okay. Good. So listen, everybody, I've asked Edgy to facilitate this, and I'll let Edgy take it over from here. And we just want to end by 6:15, but we want to take whatever time we need, and we appreciate the fact that Mark has joined us. So Ed, you go ahead.
Well, Mark, just to let you know, and everyone else that doesn't, I'm a retired Excel Energy employee. And since I've been on this committee, I'm a big advocate. I understand cities can talk to utility companies like Black Hills and Excel, but the important thing I keep mentioning to them is we need to go to the PUC to help make changes. I knew as an Excel employee, we can't do anything different for the city than we can to any other corporation or residential area. And I'm not talking about the franchise agreement. That's an important agreement where the cities can do something. But in between those times, we need to go directly to the PUC and work with Black Hills and Excel on the daily basis if we need to. But anyway, I'm glad you're here, Mark, and I'll let you introduce yourself and give us a little idea of what the city has asked you to do.
Sure. Well, as you indicated, I'm Mark Davidson. I'm a director and shareholder in the Denver law firm of Fairfield and Woods. I've been practicing in this area for a very long time. A little bit of background, I represented Public Service Company of Colorado for about a dozen years, once upon a time. I've also, after that, represented Tri-State Generation and Transmission, the largest generation transmission cooperative in the state. And I've also done work on behalf of independent power producers, entities that build wind farms and solar facilities to then sell the output to Public Service Company or Tri-State. And I, once upon a time, represented the Colorado Association of Municipal Utilities, which are about 17 or so municipal utilities, including Colorado Springs utilities, for instance, that are municipal electric utilities across the state. So I also represent Colorado Natural Gas, which is the natural gas distribution company, serves Pueblo West. And so I've got a fairly deep background in fixed utilities matters on both the gas and electric sides. Once upon a time, when the commission first began considering the development of resource planning, prior to that time, the resources that were identified were generation resources that were identified by utilities were just identified, and they sent a book to the commission saying, this is what we're going to do over the next few years. And when we need a certificate of public convenience and necessity, CPCN, we'll come and file that with you, and that's in our book, and we'll prosecute that case and add that resource. Well, 25 years or so ago, it was thought that it was a better process to involve more parties in the resource planning process for utilities. And so the commission at that time had a rulemaking proceeding where it implemented integrated resource planning rules. And that's a fancy way of saying, looking at all the various resources available to meet the identified need in the future of the electric utility. Those rules went through, after every resource plan filed by Public Service Company, or in those days Aquila, now Black Hills, the rules were revised, and they probably went through half a dozen revisions over a number of years till we have the rules we have in place now. They're electric resource planning rules, and those rules require both Public Service Company and Black Hills to periodically file a resource plan with the commission. And those plans, the process, I should say, of reviewing and approving those plans are split into two pieces. Phase one is where the utility presents its plan and says, here are the resources we have identified that we need over this next time horizon. And that's where we are with Black Hills in the proceeding that we're talking about today. They have filed their phase one of their most recent electric resource plan. Phase two, once phase one is completed, phase two is the process whereby the utility sends out a request for proposals that seeks bids from qualified bidders for the various resources that are identified by the utility and approved by the commission in phase one. And that's a competitive bidding process that the utility manages. However, there's what's called an independent evaluator that I'll say looks over the shoulder, if you will, of the utility to assure that the bidding process is conducted fairly. And those independent evaluators are approved by the commission as well. And so at the end of phase two, there are a number of bids that have been received. The utility evaluates those bids and identifies the so-called winning bidders. And at the end of that process, the contract negotiations between the utility and the winning bidder begin for either a purchase power agreement where the bidder is going to build, let's say, a wind farm and sell the output to the utility, or there could be a negotiation where the winning bidder will build the facility and then transfer ownership to the utility. And a third prospect is the utility bidding itself on a particular resource to meet the identified need in phase one that I mentioned a moment ago. And so that process goes through, and at the end of that, there are contracts that are awarded, and the resources then are built by the winning bidders, depending upon what the contractual arrangement is with the utility, and the output or the unit itself is sold to the utility going forward until the next resource plan comes around and we do it all over again. So that's a little background of how we got to where we are today. And as I mentioned earlier, we're at phase one of the Black Hills current electric resource plan. And Black Hills is proposing, just in general terms, to add, let's see, 457 megawatts of renewable resources by 2030 as part of this plan. I will say that the entire peak load for peak demand for the Black Hills system is presently 443 megawatts in 2022 and rising to 471 by the end of the planning horizon in 2030. So you can see this is a major addition of generation resources to the Black Hills system, proposed addition to the Black Hills system over the next few years. Now, all of those resources are proposed to be renewable resources. Black Hills will not entertain any bids in phase two for coal-fired generation, and only limited acceptance of any gas-fired generation. That's important because as part of their resource plan, Black Hills is intending to maintain their gas-fired units at the airport, the so-called PAGS units. And they are leaning on those units to be able to support the renewable energy resources that they're proposing to acquire as a result of this resource plan. And what's important there, as you probably know, is obviously the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine all the time. So you've got to have what we call firm resources in reserve to meet the customer's needs on a 24-hour basis year round. And so on a cloudy, windless day, you're going to need, in this case, gas-fired generation to provide the electricity that the customers require. So the proposal in the resource plan is obviously to continue to operate the PAGS units. They're proposing, Black Hills is proposing to decommission 3 diesel generators. The total megawatts of those are 28 megawatts, I think. There's one in Rocky Ford, one in Pueblo area, and I can't remember where the third one is, but they're small units. They're very old. They have historically been used just for peak demand situations where the utility was running out of electricity to provide customer needs, and fire those up on an as-needed basis for a short time to get over the peak, usually in the summertime, when they needed additional generation. So those are the basics of what the resources are that are being requested here. On the cost or rate impact side, Black Hills is proposing to reduce its renewable resource charge. That's a component of your bill each month, from 2% to 1% for until 2026. And their intent here is to provide some near-term rate relief to customers of that 1%, because in addition to the regular rates that you're faced with on the Black Hills system, they have gotten commission approval of the recovery of the extraordinary costs incurred from Winter Storm Uri in February of 2021 that we all experienced. And so there's going to be an adder, or if it hasn't already shown up on your bills, an adder to your bills on a monthly basis to recoup the cost approved by the commission for the extra energy that the utility had to acquire during Winter Storm Uri to keep the lights on. So the offset there, it's debatable whether the 1% reduction in the RESA, which is the renewable energy surcharge, totally offsets this Winter Storm Uri surcharge. Probably not. But the idea is to provide some level of rate relief to customers in the near term, and then begin imposing the charge for these renewable resources to be acquired in this plan starting in 2026. So think of it as a deferral, if you will, of the additional costs necessary to add resources to the Black Hills system. So that's the gist of where we are in, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes or so. And I'll try and answer any questions that deal with specifics that I can. I will say that the case, so Black Hills has filed what we call its direct case, and we do it at the Public Utilities Commission. They file their request supported by direct testimony. And that testimony is submitted in writing in question and answer format, along with all the exhibits that support the positions taken by the company. They also were required by the commission to file supplemental direct testimony. And the topic for the supplemental direct testimony was the, I'll call it, failure of a recent 200 megawatt wind project that was supposed to have been come online as a result of the last resource plan. And the bidder was unable to perform. And so the commission wanted to know what the basic reason was, what the circumstances were around that contract not going forward. And the 200 megawatts is a significant piece of generation, obviously. So we have answer testimony to be filed by all of the non-Black Hills parties coming up in November. And that testimony is intended to respond to the direct and supplemental direct testimony filed by the company in support of its application. And where we are in this process now is there are various discovery requests being sent to Black Hills by certain parties in the case, asking for clarification of what has been proposed, or trying to get some additional information in order to prepare the answer testimony of the interveners in the case. And then after that, Black Hills will have the opportunity to do discovery on the answer testimony and file its rebuttal testimony. And then the case goes to hearing before the commission after the first of the year. So that's where we are procedurally. And I'll say substantively with that summary.
Well, Mark, thanks. We'll open it up to questions, but I did want to ask you one thing. You didn't mention batteries. As you know, Excel, and I don't know exactly right in front of me, is planning on putting in, I want to say about 500, 600, 700 megawatts of wind and about that much in solar, but their battery was going to be, I think, about 250 megawatts. And I would hope that we would stick with that. That's the, I think it's cheaper to build, if I'm not mistaken, than solar and wind. But I would suggest that is real important because, like you said, wind don't blow all the time and the sun don't, but those batteries, you know, they can produce and be charged off peak, you know, very easily. And the other thing I wanted to mention was the on the gas side, you know, they plan on Black Hills plans to just use the gas out at the airport here in Pueblo as a peak loading. Is that what you said?
So excuse me, the PAGS units at the airport are what we would refer to as base load units. They can run 24/7 for as long as you need them. The idea being that they support not only the renewable energy facilities on the system, but can provide base load or constant power for customers 24/7. And they're, as I said before, they're going to lean on those as they add, basically double their peak demand in renewable energy by this resource plan.
And the reason I brought that up, Mark, just real fast, is San Isabel has some wind generators, and I heard you see them not running sometimes when the wind's going. There's only one running, yeah. And I had heard that they've already purchased their coal, so if they don't burn that coal and they pick it up with wind energy, they get penalized, or they somehow don't make their contract. And so I would hope that we'd look at that with this natural gas, because it'd be silly for Black Hills to be using a gas generator because they have to use what they've purchased or for future purchases, and not use their solar and wind. So just another reminder. And I saw someone had a question. Did you say?
Yeah, let me just for clarification. This is Mark. This is Steve. Having been a former city council member for Pueblo, can you clarify what your role is in relation to the city? The assumption here is that Laura gets one of our members had talked about in terms of us being able to address the Utilities Commission, and then it was told to us that the city has hired a firm to be able to represent them. Could you kind of explain that relationship before we get into the rest of the questions?
Yeah, yes, I can. So I was retained by the city to represent the city's interests in this Black Hills resource plan. I also assisted the city a few years ago in the question about the franchise and the municipalization of the Black Hills system. And I represented the city in just some other Black Hills proceedings, as well as the Public Service Company resource plan, which might sound a little odd because, as you know, the city receives its electricity from Black Hills, not the Public Service Company. However, the city's interest in the Public Service resource plan was the proposed closure of Comanche 3 and the impact, the potential financial impact or economic impact on the community. And the city's interest was to make sure that the just transition plan attributes of the Public Service Company proposal to close Comanche 3 earlier than its life, if you will, are adequately taken care of. And there's, as you may know, statutory requirements that the utility, in this case, Public Service Company, has to meet with respect to those just transition plans to make sure that the community is, I'll say, held harmless as much as possible from the standpoint of employment and continued tax payments to the community, property tax payments, and trying to, I'll say, ease the transition away from Comanche 3 as a coal-fired generator that the city has hosted for all these years, but taken no benefit from, as far as electricity is concerned, from Comanche 3. So those are the matters that I've handled for the city in the last 4 or 5 years or so. I took over the representation from Bill McEwen, who you may know, had represented the city previously, and that's the kind of work that I've done on behalf of the city at the Public Utilities Commission.
Thank you, Mark.
Sure.
I had a couple of questions, Mark. Thanks for that explanation.
You bet.
So a couple of concerns. You know, Black Hills has this timeline basically showing that they're going to add renewables, you know, to through 2030, right? So so that most of their energy is going to be generated through renewable energy.
Right.
But what happens in 2030? You know, so the rates stay kind of flat, right? That's one question. Let me put the other question out there too, because I think it's related. You know, PAGS was built in 2010, and as a result of that, the rates, you know, to Black Hills customers went significantly up, right? Making Black Hills one of the most expensive utilities in Colorado, by the way. You know, what happens to that facility as we bring all these renewables in? They're going to sell that energy to other utilities. How are they going to compensate the Black Hills customers?
So there's several questions there. Let me take them in reverse order. So the PAGS units will continue to be owned, operated, and providing service by Black Hills as part of this resource plan that we're discussing here today. As I mentioned before, you know, the 457 megawatts of renewable energy has basically, that's the nameplate, if you will. If all those resources were operating full blast at the same time, that's the maximum output that you would get. Now, as you know, both solar and wind facilities, as with other renewable resources, other than geothermal, I guess, they're intermittent. And so they don't operate all the time at the same level. And so you may have a windy day or a sunny day or both. But the point is you need the couple hundred megawatts of gas-fired generation at the PAGS units to support the rest of the system. So that of the 443 megawatts of peak demand on the system, you know, you may only have 200 megawatts at one time of renewables that are actually working to meet demand. And the PAGS units are providing the rest of the energy to the system that's required for customer needs. So the way that the plan is drafted is to continue to own and operate those PAGS units through 2030. Now, your second point was, or first point was, what happens in 2030? Well, between now and 2030, there will be another resource plan to be filed by Black Hills that will look past 2030 to determine what additional resources, if any, are needed and what kind of resources those would be. So we don't know, obviously, what will happen between now and 2030, but this plan is predicated on the basis of adding the renewable resources that they've identified a need for and the continued operation of the gas-fired generation. I will say, let me circle back to one other thing that was mentioned earlier, batteries. The way that renewable energy used to be done is someone would build a wind farm, would propose to build a wind farm. They build the wind farm, let's say a 200 megawatt wind farm. They have a purchase power agreement with the utility and they'd sell the output. Wind generation was at one time in the 15%, 20% level of how it, when it was available. Now those availability factors have greatly increased over time with more efficient wind turbines and more efficient transmission systems, et cetera. So those availability factors have increased on both wind and solar as well. Those panels, the panels that are in place now are much more efficient and can convert sunlight into energy much more efficiently as well. But still, it's not like having coal-fired generation or gas-fired generation that's cranking away and meeting the demand 24 hours a day. So batteries are now coming into play for some of the renewable resources that are proposed. So if you have a solar facility that you're proposing of some size. You might also combine that with a proposal to have batteries at the same location, as was mentioned earlier, to store excess energy in the battery. So when the sun goes down, you can, I'll say flip the switch, there's more to it than that, but just think of it that way, and bring the resource from the batteries into the system to continue to provide service to customers for anywhere from 4 to 8 hours is sort of the life of a full battery at this stage. And there's a lot of work being done here in Golden at NREL on batteries to try to improve their efficiency and storage capability. But I anticipate that what Black Hills will likely see are some proposals for combinations of wind and batteries, solar and batteries, as part of the bids that they receive in response to their RFP.
Were there any other questions?
Yes, we had one in the chat, so I'll read it out loud.
Thank you.
It's from Laura, and it says, "Thank you for being present, Mr. Davidson. In your experience, given the renewal requirements of the state, is it absolutely necessary for Black Hills to fully match their peak demand in renewable resources? As a follow-up, what percentage of these renewables are required to be owned and operated by Black Hills or directly purchased from a dedicated third-party contract?"
Okay, I'll take them in reverse order. There's no requirement that Black Hills own and operate dedicated renewable facilities. They can own and operate those facilities if they can effectively compete with third-party bidders for the opportunity to build, own, and operate those facilities. The statutory requirements that we have in Colorado now that the PUC is working under are to have certain levels of carbon emission reductions that are triggered over time pursuant to statute. And you may have heard of 80 by 30, and that is 80% reduction in carbon emissions by 2030, which is the target for the state that the utilities are seeking to meet. And part of this resource plan by Black Hills is intended to achieve that requirement. So, and then obviously the next step, at least in the state, has been proposed to be carbon free by 2050. No more gas generation or, gas with hydrogen, those types of situations where renewable natural gas, those types of things, which are all sort of, I'll say, in their infancy, in their development. And there may be some bids in this, in response to the RFP in phase 2 of this proceeding that come forward with some hydrogen fuel proposals in the outer years of the resource plan. We'll see. But those statutory requirements are what the PUC is working with now to, I'll say, assist the public service and Black Hills in achieving those required emission reductions over the time horizon from here to 2030 and beyond.
Is there other questions? Mark, I got just a recommendation. You and I both worked at public service company at the same time. And I hope you remember the time I tried to explain that the Public Utility Company, a Public Utility Commission has a lot of control over Excel, Black Hills. And a good example I like to give them, hopefully you remember, but public service asked for a rate increase, and the public utilities came back and said, your management to performance people is way out of tune. You got way too many managers. And so what they did is they said, no rate increase, you've got to fix that first. And I remember I was there. I seen managers have to take promotions. They got rid of them. They got those numbers down. A few years later, about 5 or 6 years later, they went, public service went for that rate increase again. And they said, the PUC said, geez, it looks like you've got duplicate departments all over a public service company. And I remember that too. They came through every department with a consultant that looked, they called it a time and motion study. And they found that public service did have some duplicate ones. And here at my time in Pueblo, I worked for Excel on the gas side, and I met with people from Black Hills all the time. And I always was amazed that someone like me wasn't there at projects. They would send a manager or something. So I would suggest on this Black Hills deal, I would sure be interested to see what their management performance worker is and what their whether they have duplicate departments or not. You probably also know they bought Cheyenne Light and Power from Public Service Company, Black Hills years ago. And, you know, back then they were a generating company. They had very little distribution companies. So they're kind of new at this game, considering, you know, Excel's over 100 years and some of these others. But I didn't mean to take up so much time. It's more, I don't need an answer, but I just think it's a way to get these rates down without really touching any of this other stuff we're talking about. If there's waste there, and they are a regulated utility company. And I should mention, I don't know Mark, and he's not working for me. We both work for the same company, but disclaimer, I'm just happy to be in this position, and him and his.
Yeah, so I mean, Black Hills is, I would say, a very experienced electric and gas utility. I mean, they operate in more than just Colorado, as you know. And they acquired the electric system from Aquila a number of years ago that they're owning and operating now. Now they've expanded it and added the PAGS units and things like that. So I don't know what their management structure looks like and how that might impact their cost structure for rate making purposes. And I don't know that usually those types of questions arise in a rate making proceeding, a base rate case, whereby their operation and maintenance and administrative costs of the company are examined by the commission for purposes of setting rates going forward, rather than having that type of analysis done in a resource plan like we're talking about here today. So here we're really focused on what the needs are going in the future for meeting demand on the system and how the utility will best meet those needs from an operational standpoint, from a sustainability standpoint, in this case from an emissions reduction standpoint, and a cost standpoint. So all of those components are part of the analysis that goes into the development of the resource plan by Black Hills that's been proposed, and the review and analysis of that plan by the commission as we move forward through this phase 1 and then the subsequent phase 2.
Sure. Well, thanks. And I did remember you saying they're going to be asking for a 1% increase. Am I correct?
1% reduction in their renewable energy service adjustment.
Didn't you mention there was something on the rate part that they were going to make us pay?
Right now they're collecting 2%, and they're going to drop that to 1% up until 2026 under this plan. Well,
thanks for being so kind. Any other questions?
Yes, Marty has a hand up, and I think Laura has another question.
Okay.
Marty.
Yes. I have a question that relates to what Ken was talking about in terms of the graph that's in the ERP that shows the leveling off of rates and, in fact, going down, reducing rates until 2030. But I have a question about what the heck happens in 2030. I know that's when their franchise is up, but that leaves a big question mark as to how they're going to handle the rates.
Yeah, and that's, you know, the way the resource plan is constructed in the initial proposal here is to defer recovery of costs through up until 2026 and drop the RISA by 1%, as I mentioned before. But, you know, are you going to be robbing Peter to pay Paul in the future? Is there going to be a significant rate adjustment in the future as a result of this plan? And I think that's one of the considerations for the commission in this proceeding as these new resources are approved and come online. how the company will then seek to integrate those costs into its current rate structure. And as I mentioned before, some of those things are not really up for consideration in this proceeding. However, the cost, the future or projected cost of this plan is on the table for consideration by the commission. So the timing of when some of these resources come online will be determined a bit by the bidders and the availability of the components of the resources that they propose to build and either sell the output or sell the facility to the company. And so it's a little bit of an open question about the timing of rate increases coming in the future based upon what resources are approved in this plan and when they come online.
Laura.
Yes, hi. Thank you again for being present. I just had a question again about how the resources are integrated. So the big concern is the $1.7 billion projected,
right,
to essentially match that peak load in renewable infrastructure. And knowing, you know, we've got an RTO here on the horizon that can help make renewable energy purchases, you know, very affordable. Is there an opportunity here, potentially, for Black Hills to meet all of the requirements that they need to meet, but do it more affordably through market purchases versus, you know, construction of all of this infrastructure? And so if there's an opportunity to, you know, intervene favoring an alternative to you know, the very costly construction of these resources versus opportunities for market purchases, I'm just curious, you know, if you feel like that is a viable option for Black Hills at this time in their proposal.
That's a good question, Laura. And I'd say it depends with most things. It depends. And what it depends on is this. As you noted, there is a requirement, a statutory requirement that the utilities in Colorado investigate joining an RTO, and for those that aren't familiar with the terminology, a regional transmission organization. Black Hills has identified an RTO that they intend to join. The reason that it depends on whether there can be enough market purchases available through the RTO versus building generation in Colorado is the availability of adequate transmission, the availability of adequate resources in other areas that are members of the RTO to be joined by Black Hills, and the availability of, you know, reasonably priced power from those resources. The challenge for the company, as I see it, is to get from here to there. What do they need to do? Because they have to keep the lights on. That's their statutory obligation to provide safe, reliable service at just and reasonable rates to their customers. And so the reliability comes into play when they're adding these generation resources in the near term in anticipation of joining an RTO in the future. And so the timing of new resources being built and coming onto the Black Hills system versus Black Hills joining an RTO and purchasing additional electricity through the RTO is part of, I'll say, the balancing act that's being considered as part of this plan as well. So it's a good question. I don't have a good answer for you other than it depends on what the RTO looks like at the time and what the services are that are available through that RTO that Black Hills can take advantage of when the time comes.
Steve looks like he has a question, or would you want Marty to go first? He's got one.
Yeah, let Marty go first.
Yeah, just a question. Wouldn't, when they build out the structures for all this improvement, the ratepayer is going to end up paying for it, right? However, won't there be a return on equity of about 9% back to the company?
So Black Hills, the authorized rate of return that you're talking about that they have is roughly, I don't know, John may know better than I, what the current authorized ROE, return on equity is, but it's generally in the 9% range. So the point there, Marty, is that the utility, Black Hills in this case, is authorized to earn a 9% in our example return on their investment, but there's no guarantee that that will happen. So it's the utility's job to manage its business in a way that enables it to achieve that authorized rate of return. And sometimes they will make it and sometimes they won't. And if they are consistently under earning, that's when they'll file a rate case and say, we need more support for our business because we're not reaching our authorized rate of return over some extended period of time. And if they over earn sometimes, you know, generally speaking, the company will keep those dollars for its shareholders. But if it got out of line too much, then the commission can come forward and say, hey, wait a minute, we're going to bring you in for a rate case and reduce your rates because you're over earning. And that very rarely happens in the utility business.
Steve?
Yeah, so Mark, we have also Andrew Hayes, who's the Public Works Director for the city that is on the call. And he's been asked by the mayor to kind of be a staff liaison for our committee and the mayor. And so, Andrew, I just wanted to try to establish what the protocol would be. And we know that the city's looking at possibly hiring at least a part-time staff position that would work on energy issues and work with our advisory group. But in the interim period, Andrew has graciously offered to be part of that. And so now that we know that we have a face to the individual that really represents our city, city government and our constituents for our elected officials, that and we're advising the mayor and city council. I kind of want to know, and you are kind of the conduit for the city with the PUC in anything that I guess the city wants you to. So what would be the protocol in terms of our committee feeling like we want to have some kind of input into what might be brought in front of the PUC? And Andrew, I don't know if you are able to answer that at this point in time, but since Mark, you've worked with other communities, and I would assume others have advisory groups like we are, what would you perceive as being the kind of the protocol for us now that we know that we have a conduit?
I'm not sure if Andrew wants to weigh in first. I can tell you what I think, but if he has certain directives that he's working from, maybe that's helpful. From my perspective, I have worked with the mayor and city attorney in the past on developing testimony for the mayor to submit answer testimony in various Black Hills proceedings on behalf of the city. But I think with respect, and this was before I was engaged in this proceeding and had the opportunity to visit with you folks today, to the extent that there are specific issues that the committee believes should be addressed. I guess refer those to Andrew if he's going to be the liaison between the city and me, or to Mayor Gradisar to tell me what your interests are and what position you might like to take on specific issues.
Okay, great. Andrew, anything that you want to offer towards that?
I was going to say that Mark probably put that just perfectly.
Okay. Good.
I'm happy to, like I say, I've routed issues and concerns and questions from the committee here through staff and then up to the mayor, so we can continue that. So please, if there are issues that the committee would like to see addressed or questions or whatnot that need to be raised, please feel free to route those through me and we can get that up through the mayor and over to Mark.
That'd be great.
Andrew, I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And always thanks for being a part of this. But I think also, Mark, I wasn't implying that we were all going to put you on speed dial. And I just wanted to make sure for our guests and also for our advisory members that we have felt like we wanted to make sure, and we weren't aware exactly who was available to help give testimony and represent our city. And so now that we have that kind of established, I hope the rest of the advisory group and also community citizens that are interested in what we're doing know that we will have a protocol. Then we can listen to people in the community too, in terms of what their concerns are. And that can be channeled up through, at this point in time, through Andrew, yes, and to the mayor and the city attorney, and then to you, Mark.
That'd be great. That works for me. And I'm happy to have one sort of point of reference in Andrew to work through what the committee is interested in, as well as conferring with the mayor and Dan as we go forward in this case. I should also say, just for the information for the group, that I've been working closely with the Pueblo County attorney, Francis Concelia, on these issues. And Francis and I worked together on a recent Black Hills proceeding, I think quite successfully. It ended up in a settlement agreement that both of our clients supported. And we're working closely together on this. So we're trying to bring all the resources to bear on behalf of the city and the county where those interests are aligned in this proceeding. So I just wanted to mention that for everybody's information, that we've been working together on some of these matters.
Okay, Mark, I just want to again thank you. And I know on our agenda we had you for a much shorter window of time, so I appreciate you hanging in there with us.
No, that's fine, whatever you need. Yep.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity, and I'm glad, Laura, that you initially kind of got us thinking about how would we approach the PUC in our role as the advisory group. So now I think we know what the channels are, the protocol, and I'm assuming we probably thought that would be in place, but we appreciate having you, Mark, knowing we have somebody, a face now to represent our advisory group, our thoughts, and also the citizens. And so, Mark, thank you so very much.
You're welcome.
Thanks,
and
Mark.
I'm happy to talk to you guys again if questions arise as we move forward, but I'll work with Andrew on and address issues that you may raise through him, as well as Mayor Gradisar and City Attorney Kagosik. So thank you all for attending today. It was good to see you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Edgy, thanks for facilitating that. On the agenda, the next item we have is back to our committees, and we certainly have gotten away from that. And I don't want to do anything to not say that we're going to get back to that. But Andrew, since we have you, do you have any communications with the city for us, or any thoughts after today?
Well, thank you. I did want to bring up that during a previous meeting, a question had come up about a proposal to align the city's taxing ordinances to those of the state. And so there was a proposal there and some discussion on that topic. I wanted to see if I could bring the draft ordinance to our next meeting that would do that and kind of have a little bit of discussion about that topic and determine whether that's something the committee wants to recommend to the mayor as a potential course of action. Is that something that would be something the committee is interested in looking at next meeting?
Any of you respond?
Yes, sure.
Yeah, I think that's great.
Essentially, just as a short, quick update on it, the draft version basically mirrors states' policies with respect to renewable or equipment that generates in renewable resources for different projects. So it basically does not tax call for sales and use taxes on those items. So it's a pretty narrow definition of what's in there, but it is this would align with the state. And so from a policy standpoint, it aligns well. There are some questions and concerns to discuss, I think, about administration of that and what that impact is. And so I want to bring that full discussion, pros and cons of it, to the committee, and then let you make a call as to whether you'd like to recommend that to the mayor or not.
Okay. Also, Andrew, has there been any other further discussion in terms of allocation of funding for that position that we've been talking about?
So the 2023 budget submission has gone in. So I have not gotten on October 13th, I have a discussion with finance about the first refinement of that budget. Obviously still needs to get through council and be approved, but I will know more by next meeting on on what that outlook is for 2023.
All right, terrific. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So at this time, I'd just like to ask all of our members, kind of like the direction we've been having some guest speakers. What do we want to look at for next month? I'm not trying to get away from talking about those committees, but we've kind of been on a roll in terms of becoming a lot more informed about what's going on around us. And for those of you that have kind of initiated some of these speakers, any other thoughts in terms of anyone else that we want to have to be part of our meeting?
Hey, Steve, this is Laura. This isn't necessarily a speaker that I have in mind, but the Inflation Reduction Act has come with a really significant number of rebates and direct payment measures for energy efficiency and renewable energy and electric vehicles that will be relevant to all citizens of Pueblo. And I don't know if I'm happy to kind of present on that and what that looks like. And I don't know if as a commission, we want to try and find a way to help push that out in the community and better communicate it to residents to help them understand how to take advantage of these. But it's a thought to put out there. And if anyone is already doing that, that would also be great to know.
I think that would be a really great idea, Laura. Thank you.
Yeah, I think, we were talking about maybe fine tuning some of the different committees. I would think that'd be a great one because that really helps with our goal of getting rid of natural gas and also getting net zero homes. Maybe there's some rebates where some of the landlords and some of the people can go with the solar, possibly wind, but that would be a great idea for a new committee. So great, Laura.
Well, I think that ties into this, this reduction in taxes too, right? I mean, it
ties in, communication. We kind of dropped that subject, the communication between the city and the people to help accomplish, because the city could do whatever they had, other than go hold gun to people's head and tell them you got to get rid of natural gas. But it seems like a smart thing to do is take advantage of what Laura's talking about. And I'm sure the state's got them. The same thing, sort of rebates that are available. Black Hills might have some, so does Excel on the gas side. Of course, gas, they're probably not going to give you, Excel's probably not going to give you any rebates for cutting off gas at our house, but they used to.
I think this IRA bill also changes, who can use some of these incentives, right? The Senate incentives for putting rooftop solar on your house, for example, are back to 30%, right? And now nonprofits can take advantage of that, and city organizations. So that changes the finances of if you're going to do a renewable project, how would you do it? Would you own it or would you lease it, right? Or would you do a power purchase agreement, for example? So I think it's really good. Right before this meeting, the mayor came in and said, "I'm off to Washington D.C. to the White House to talk about this and the infrastructure bill." So maybe we'll get some more information from him on what's going on.
So Laura, let me ask, what are you looking at in terms of a presentation in terms of time?
I could certainly keep it to 10 minutes and kind of email out a you know, a cheat sheet to everyone just internally. Externally, I think that's a broader discussion, certainly for us.
So do we want to make this kind of an event, since you feel it's important and others do too, that we inform the public as much as possible? We could invite the media to this presentation. I'm sure we could try to get somebody from the newspaper that could actually do a story. And we have contacts with the electronic media that they might be able to have somebody come by and spend a little bit of time if it's a relatively short presentation. If you feel this is an avenue, and also it gives an opportunity for this committee to get some kind of notoriety in the community that we're actually doing something and looking out for our citizens. And so what's everybody's thoughts on that?
I think it's great. The only thing is, Laura, I feel for you because to cover enough that we want to get to the media means your presentation may be broader than just what this, you know, what the feds are doing. Because I hate to do one and just give them part of the information of what's available to them. But for you to do the research and you know, make enough bang so we get a lot of the public and the low income and the landlords and you know, other possibilities of how we're going to do this. What do you think, Laura?
Yeah, I think it could be helpful to have a press release on it because there are a few resource links that it would be great to get out in our local media to direct people to where they can learn more, you know, get the absolute details about every little item they might qualify for, you know, in their residence, for example. And then there's going to need to be a follow-up because there's some pieces that the state is responsible for that they haven't even figured out yet. And so I think, yeah, maybe a broad presentation and kind of a press release for them with a few resource links would be a good starting point.
Laura, this is Woody. How soon is the state talking about having their stuff together for it? Do we know?
We don't know. I'm going to reach out again to the Colorado Energy Office to see if they're going to kind of create a new department within their office, or if they're going to be trying to contract out some pieces of this that require them to certify low and moderate income residents. So I think they're working through that as rapidly as they can. I think they need to try and have that ready to go for like January 2023. And so again, there's plenty we can put out there and then, you know, could follow up with early in the year or late this year, hopefully as we hear from the state.
Thank you.
So kind of what my vision is about this is that Alyssa and I visited a little bit earlier today in terms of this advisor group has been in existence for over a year now, since I believe July of last year is when we started. And remember, for many months, we met twice a month. So we've had more than a year's meetings in terms of what we've been able to accomplish. And we have accomplished things. And I just think it's about time maybe past our anniversary that the community knows more about what's going on and that we are there for them and also that we are people that they can contact. This could be a great tool to do that and give a little bit of additional information in terms of talking about a brief history of this group and how it came about and what we've accomplished and what we're hoping to accomplish with the fact that we're looking at the city actually creating an energy position that, and then also in terms of Andrew, some of the things that you've been working on in terms of audits and stuff like that, updating. I think it's important that we're not just some kind of hidden group, that we do have a purpose and that we really are there to represent the citizens. And that was my vision. Now, whether or not that can be done in one meeting or not, I just think it's time for us to kind of reflect back and make the public a little bit more aware of what what's been happening before we move forward. Any thoughts from any of you about doing that?
Well, just a reminder, I would make sure you get the city's permission, because we'll be speaking on behalf of the city. So
that is a good point. And we have Alyssa who's in charge of the city and Andrew. So, I mean, we would have time to put, and Laura, if you're going to be kind of the key presenter and putting together a press release. But I can't imagine anything that we would say that the mayor wouldn't approve of, since we've been doing it on his behalf. And he's been involved every bit of what we've done. And I haven't heard anything negative about the results or what we've been working towards. But I think it's good for the individuals that have worked pretty hard, I believe, and also bring a lot of knowledge to the city that there is an avenue to get a little bit of notoriety, and also people to know who you are, and that they can reach out to you. Obviously, some of you are connected with other groups that know that you're part of this, but that's kind of the tip of the iceberg in terms of really what's out there. And the fact of what you're having to talk about, Laura, that has a much wider appeal for a lot of citizens. And that could be the vehicle to do it.
I'd be happy to connect the group with our PIO, Haley Robinson, because she
so can we try that?
Put together a press release.
And again, I'm not trying to put off the committees, but I would appreciate anybody if you want to volunteer to kind of see what we can do to resurrect those committees. A lot of it was just lack of participation. You had the same individuals that were meeting, and it wasn't that the committees weren't trying to be inclusive. We just didn't have people making that time commitment. So any thoughts?
Well, as you know, I kind of was the one that started the presentation. I'm certainly glad to. I have mentioned already some. I'd like to see some of those committee, the names of them changed, and the committee members.
So how about if we plan that out as the second meeting?
Yeah, 2 months from now.
Yeah, 2 months from now. And then that, Ed, you could be responsible for helping put that together.
Sounds good.
Is everybody good with the plan?
Yeah.
And Laura will work together with Alyssa and Andrew and the mayor.
Yes, that sounds great.
Okay. And any of our guests like to, if you're still there, have any comments? Our guests all gone.
Oh, I'm still here.
Okay.
Yeah, I can just introduce myself. My name's Kayla Williams. I'm a graduate student at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs. And for my thesis research, I'm looking at kind of mid-level actors in energy decision-making and policy. And I was really interested in Pueblo and this commission. So just decided to come today to see, you know, what all you do. I might be attending a few more meetings and hopefully can interview you guys eventually.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
And you're very welcome.
Yeah, Kayla, this is Edgy. You can get my contact information from Alyssa, and I'll be glad to help you in any way I can.
Awesome, thank you. Yeah, I still have to defend my proposal, so I can't do interviews yet until I have permission, but hopefully in November, I can start doing that, so.
Well, Edgy can help you defend it. He's been working out. So anyhow, with no further business, we're adjourned.
Everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye. What do you, let's see, the assistant chief or no?
I'm the captain.